Hey, and a huge welcome back to this week's episode of the PDHP and CAFS podcast. You're with me, Kel Bell, and I hope that you are doing very well for this time of year. At the time of recording, we are literally in week 10. We are just about to embark on Year 12 graduation if we haven't done that so far. So, look, exciting things happening for everyone in New South Wales. And if you have a Year 12 class, I hope that you are enjoying the graduation celebrations. If you have a Year 12 student, I know there's quite a few of you, I hope that you are enjoying this part of the year, but also this part of the journey. I think, 13 years of schooling is quite a lot. Our girls are in Year 8 and in Year 5, and it always makes me feel very old to think about how old they are, but also to think about their years in school because, in 4 years, Cass will be in Year 12, and that just blows me away. Lex will be in Year 6 next year, and I'm really not looking forward to that because I'm a very emotional being. I think I will absolutely bawl because my baby, my youngest one is about to graduate Year 6 and finish primary school, and that's really scary. That really makes me feel, first of all, old, but also think about, that your babies are no longer your babies. Anyway, it is a very busy time for me. I have lots happening. I was thinking last night, I have so many tabs open. I also have some physical tabs open on my computer, and I'm not usually like that. I usually feel like I have control of everything, but there is so much happening in the background, not just, on the work front, not just, this beautiful job that I get to do, to lead PDHP and CAFS and HMS now across New South Wales, but also, things that are happening at home. So I hope that things aren't too crazy for you. And I'm very much looking forward to a break over the weekend. In the next couple of days, it's Cass and Lexi's birthday. But after that, I'll be diving straight back into the CAFS conference stuff. So look, before I even hit record on today, I've spent, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm going to be very open, but I've spent a little while procrastinating to think about what I was going to share with you on today's podcast episode, because I have mapped out most podcast episodes. There were a couple the back end of this term that I didn't quite, kind of had planned out. And I'm thinking, I've got so much in my brain, so much content, like actual teaching content, but also strategies and skills and tips. I'm like, where the hell do I start? 20 years of teaching CAFS and, professional learning for about 14 of those years. Most of my career, I've been teaching teachers, improving your practice about CAFS. So look, today I'm going to share with you some things that I wish I did when I actually first started teaching CAFS, but also 4 things that you can enhance the way you teach community family studies. So I do have an acronym for you, and I shared this at the CAFS conference last year. If you were there, Central Coast, Kilcare, the most stunning location. We decided to move up here about 8 years ago. We initially bought our house. It was a bit of a tree house, to be honest. It was like an absolute jungle, a dive. It was pretty crap. But we bought it in the most magical spot because we knew at some point we wanted to retire up here. I grew up in Western Sydney. I was born in Westmead, same as Daniel. We went to Catherine McCauley in Parramatta Marist. And then, I grew up in Baulkham Hills, Daniel Marylands. We then moved to Kings Langley in 2005. Just so happened the year that we decided to get married, and our dog had a litter of puppies. The things that you do, hey, I look back on that year and go, how the hell did I get through that year? So we had the dogs. So we had Honey, our lab, beautiful lab, had puppies. We moved into our house. We renovated. Well, Daniel renovated. We got married in September. My first HSC class went through. Just a whirlwind. I don't know why we do these things, but when I look back on moments like that, I think, how the hell did I get through that? Anyway, look, it's been a long ride, but hopefully what I share with you today are some little tweaks that you can make in your CAFS classroom based on things that I wish I had done back then 20 years ago, but also common mistakes that I still see teachers make, but also their kids make as well. So I'm going to share with you something that I have shared before with some teachers. I'm a very visual learner, and I've only really realised how much of a visual learner I am in the later part of my life. So hopefully this might help with your visuals as well. Okay, so we often use this catchphrase in CAFS, like CAFS is life. You'll see it on a lot of the things that I have, like our little drink bottles for the CAFS conference. Sorry, spoiler alert. Kids write to us CAFS is life in their graduation stuff, little gifts. But CAFS is about life. And CAFS consumes a lot of our life. It's consumed my whole career, 20 years of teaching this course. And I think before I hit record, like I said, I was like, what the hell do I speak about? There's so much up here in my brain that I take for granted. But if you sat down and spoke to me and if we were working together, like you could get an insight into that. But these are 4 very simple things that you can literally adopt with your kids, maybe in the holidays, in the lead up to HSC, but also in the lead up to the first time through to Year 12. But it also, if you're taking your first CAFS class next year, or if you're a seasoned pro, hopefully some of the things I share with you guys today will resonate. Okay, the first one, so our acronym is LIFE. And I always say that we need to make connections for success. That's the best part about CAFS, whereas, PDH, HMS is very black and white. You do this and this is the impact it has. Whereas CAFS, very much interrelated. And I know that when PE teachers come into CAFS, if they've taught stage 6 PDHP for such a long time, they often become very overwhelmed with CAFS because of that. There are so many interrelated concepts and content in our course that I think that's why our kids often struggle, because they're very much used to that rigidity of a lot of their learning, whereas CAFS is very much connected. So it's life. So the first one is hopefully linking to families, communities, and case studies, interrelationships between content, fostering positive relationships with your students. And that goes without saying with any of the stuff that we do with our kids, but also enhancing assessment. I still see some assessments that don't really show those connections for success, but hopefully what I dive into today is going to help. Okay, so connection and the link to families and communities. What I mean by that is to actually expose the kids to lots of different things that are connected to community and family studies. Now, when I first started teaching, now this is back in 2004, blackboards were still around, overheads were still around, textbooks were still very much, a part of classroom practice. And we had that purple textbook, which I loved. And I've shared this before, I literally took it to bed. I'd read it. What a nerd. I'd read it and I'd highlight things and I'd have Post-it notes everywhere. That became my Bible. And I really taught from the textbook for such a long time. I would talk at the kids. And that's literally what I did for about an hour. They would write some summaries from the textbook. They would answer the questions from the textbook. And I would maybe include a couple of personal stories or connections. And that was literally about it. That's all I would do for 2 years. I don't know how my kids did very well in 2005 when they did the HSC. I think I had 2 band 6s, a couple of band 5s. I think most kids were above, at least a band 4. Maybe a couple of band 3s. I don't know. I can't remember. It was 20 years ago. But look, I think one of the biggest things that you can do is to expose the kids to lots of different things. So here are some strategies to do that. They are on their phones all the time, but what you can do is potentially display like a media wall in the classroom. Now, I know that physical media like magazines, newspapers aren't, very common these days, but that could be a visual. I know I did that back in the early days. I would buy the newspaper. I would get a subscription to the Daily Telegraph, delivered to school, and I would cut out articles that would link to CAFS. Now, that's really time consuming, but you might find some online articles and use them as like a a deep dive, or use them as a situation or a case study to explore. But exposing the kids to lots of different things in the media that link back to our course. Now, I'm not talking about celebrities. I'm not talking about movies. I'm not talking about shows like Castaway and Happy Feet and Pursuit of Happiness. These are all they're all fictional stories. Yes, they have some sort of connection to our course, but I want you to find real life situations in Australia, not overseas, not in America. It's very much glamorized in the media, or very much glamorized, in Hollywood. Some of these situations that do connect to CAFS, and we expose them to the kids, and then the kids talk about those examples in their exams. Bringing it to life through real life examples is what I'm talking about. So obviously displaying a media wall or something. You might have a Pinterest page, might be a better way to go. It might be like on Google Classroom, sharing links with the kids that you see in your feed. Working out ways to embed case study scenarios and context in your classroom is going to expose the kids to lots of different things. They can use those for their examples. They can link back to them rather than just having the textbook like I did, copy and paste from the textbook or from my Google Slides. Actually talking about real life situations with the kids is going to be key in your classroom. And you want all of that to align your classroom teaching and learning activities too. So rather than going, we're going to watch a movie, we're going to watch a documentary, bringing those into your classroom and then unpacking them, then kind of diving deeper, then examining them, and then investigating them. Watching a small snippet of a clip, 3 to 4 minutes max, and then to use that as a bit of a deep dive is much better than watching a 45-minute documentary or even a 2-hour movie. Okay, number 4 is about exposing the kids to Australian documentaries. But again, just unpacking them and using bite-sized bits. There's lots of different things on YouTube. I would potentially create a YouTube playlist. We do have a bit of a list on our Pinterest page. So the Learning Network Pinterest page, which I haven't really shared much, but there's lots of stuff on there. But of course, in any of our CAFS Collective membership, at the CAFS conference, we continue to share different examples like that. And it's really important that you incorporate those situations, those case studies, those examples into your assessment tasks. I still see a lot of assessments that are very airy-fairy, that are, we're going to do a film study today. That's our assessment. That is not, to me, and I sound like I'm getting on my high horse about this, but that's not rich learning. We want the kids to be exposed to things that are actually happening in our communities, in our families, in our society. So what you might like to do with that is provide the kids with a scenario, or get them to watch a small snippet of a documentary and then base, some sort of investigation, some sort of, questions about that, rather than watching a movie, answering questions about the movie. That's not higher order thinking. That's very much primary school kind of based skills. And I think that's why some of our HSE results are still at that band 3 and 4, because it's not extending the kids. It's not getting them to go further. Okay, so that's links to families and communities. So lots of different situations and examples there. What I would also encourage your kids to do is follow things like, any of the news channels, the project. Some of it is sometimes a bit clickbaitable, if that's even a word. But some of the really good news stories are on the project. Current affair, again, just be mindful about that. 60 Minutes is probably a better example. So looking for things for the kids to follow on social media, TikTok, Instagram, to then expose them to those, this is real life. Let's bring the course to life. Okay, the next one is, so I, in our CAFS is life acronym, is the interrelationship between content. And I think this is a big thing. In PE, there are some connections, so stage 6, PE and HMS. There are some good interrelated connections between the concepts, but it's very much evident in CAFS. A good band 4 and definitely band 5 and 6, have to show that interrelationship between content. If it's not there, they're not going to do as well as what we had hoped, because we spend so much of our time teaching the content, we forget to show the kids the interrelationships between the content. So, for example, what I mean by that is, say research methodology for Year 12, research methods, all that kind of, that first unit of work that you might look at for IRP, all that stuff. There's a very big connection between reliability, validity, sampling, and bias. But a lot of people just teach it like dot point by dot point, dot point by dot point, and don't see, okay, that dot point about reliability and validity, there's actually a dot point about sampling. And that Learn To is very much about what the kids need to do with that content. And that's where the gaps are in the kids' understanding. Last week in our podcast episode 112, I shared common mistakes that our kids are making in CAFS. And if the kids are making the mistakes, that means there's a gap in our knowledge, the teacher's knowledge as well, and our skills in that content. So reliability, validity, there's massive gaps in the kids' understanding, and we're the facilitators of that learning. So there's gaps in our understanding. We might not admit it out loud, but I know there's gaps in our understanding and our teaching, because it then shows when I do master classes across New South Wales, marking for 16 years, working with schools, doing marking for trials and stuff, still conversations with teachers, it's still happening. Okay, so the way to get around this is to look at our content and look at the big picture of that content. So really look at, like, from a bit of a helicopter view, where does that connect to each other? So I think something I shared a really long time ago when I first started doing this work, and when I left the classroom, I spoke to everyone about like the umbrella of the concept. So you might have needs, then we break it down to the 6 specific needs, and then examples, and link it to resources and well-being. That's what I mean by that, like well-being. There's aspects of well-being and that connection through to like situations and case studies and our options. So looking at the big picture content and then seeing where it fits. And I think part of this like secret or this skill is to look at where else in the course is this concept, because the kids need to know that connection between the concept. I think the next point, so creating links between the content is really, really important. So that example that I had before about reliability, validity, sampling, and bias, those concepts connect with each other. If you are trying to enhance the reliability of your research, you're going to be doing different things in your research to do that. That is then going to reduce the bias that you might see in your research. You can do that through sampling, the sampling method you choose in the groups. So there's lots of different connections between the content. And of course, at the CAFS conference, we're going to really enhance those connections, because I think that's something I see a lot of, that teachers aren't showing that connection. Teaching concepts across the course, again, it comes up, in Year 11, but then something like, say, support, types of support. We have formal and informal support. We have community organisations, government agencies. We teach that in resource management Year 11. We then revisit that for families and communities. We then do it again in a little bit in groups in context through services and community organisations. We then do it again in parenting and caring. We then do it again in our options. So it's very much embedded into our course. But we often are teaching our concepts and content in silo without really looking at the big picture. So when we're doing that, we're being very mindful and embedding our connections in teaching and learning. So going, okay, well, I've looked at the big picture. I've taught the connection across the course, those concepts. Okay, here's the teaching and learning activity that is going to help you. Something I've very much tried to do at the CAFS conference for the last 3 years is to be very intentional with what we're doing. So much so that and I saw this the other day, My word for this year was intentional. Everything I do is intentional. The connections, the content, the concepts, podcasts like this, it's intentional. This is what I want you guys to do with every single facet of your teaching, not just CAFS, but HMS and PDHP as well. We need to be really intentional. That intentionality means that we're being very specific, but we're also maximizing that time that we have with the kids, those opportunities. So in our teaching and learning, we're looking for an Australian documentary. We're looking for content or concepts across that. We're looking for, maybe another way that it connects to our course. You're being very intentional with what you do. And then finally, developing assessment tasks with those things in mind. Again, something that I made the mistake of doing when I was first teaching, I'm talking the early 2000s, I would find, I might do a film study. Yes, I did do that. I might get some questions and answers. Yes, I did that. I was very creative with my assessments. I'm a very creative person in the classroom with assessment and teaching and learning activities. That's my zone of genius. But what I was doing is I wasn't setting my kids up for success. I was being super creative with my assessments, some posters or a presentation or a whole day about groups in context, or getting the kids to have lots of choice with things, creating a pamphlet and then a massive presentation. What that was doing was taking away my kids from those key skills that they need for the HSE. Now, I love learning, I love teaching, I love education, and it's not all about the HSE. I know that. But as a HSC marker for 16 years, 5 of those as the supervisor of marking, head HSC marker in New South Wales, I saw so many gaps in our kids' understanding and knowledge and skills because I think we didn't have assessment tasks that were rigorous enough, but also that actually connected our content. They were very much like, okay, here's what I still see, and this drives me nuts, really nuts, is assessment tasks on leadership. Leadership is a very small, minute part of our course, but because there are sample assessment tasks on the NESA website about leadership, that's why people still assess leadership. It is not there again in our course at all. Power is not in our course again at all. Communication is not in there again. But people are still choosing those very minute parts of the course and not thinking about the big picture in CAFS, not thinking about what's ahead for the HSE. And yes, I'm getting a bit ranty with this. And I said to myself 2 hours ago, I had nothing to talk about. But I think that's a massive gap in our skills, that we're really focusing on very minute part of the course without focusing on the bigger picture. And our assessment tasks are lacking that clear structure. Our assessment tasks are also lacking rigor. I don't know where that, I'm not saying all schools, I'm not saying all teachers, but many of the assessment tasks that I see that teachers share with me, that I've seen online, they're not rigorous enough. And that's why our kids come trial time are going, holy hell, I got 50, I got 60 out of 100, because our assessment tasks didn't set them up for success. They were way too easy. The kids were getting full marks or close to full marks. And I'm going to say, like, it's not just now. When I first started teaching, that's what I did. I made my assessment tasks way too easy, and I didn't set my kids up for success. Everything is very intentional now. So at our CAFS conference in literally 3 weeks time now, everything that we share with you is going to be really intentional. It always has been like that. Everything I say, everything I do is very intentional, thinking about the big picture. And what I've chosen to focus on this year are common mistakes our kids are still making in community and family studies, and what we can do together to really close those gaps. Because in my marking, conversations, HSE revision sessions, masterclasses, I still see those gaps in the kids. Okay, that rant just went on way too long. Okay, The next one, and this kind of is like a bit contradictory to what I just said about HSC and rigor, but it's about just connecting with the kids. CAFS is about life, but CAFS is life. I love our course, and I can't believe like an hour and a half ago, I had no idea what I was going to talk about because it has become so much a part of our course. Now, if you are a new listener to the podcast, I don't have a fancy podcast studio. I do work from home, and I don't have a soundproof barrier. So what you can hear right now, and if you're watching this live, you can hear our corgi who thinks she owns Killcare, and she stands outside barking at everything. I don't know what she's barking at, but she's super loud when I hear this recording back. Okay, so just being yourself is really important. And I think cutting out, all the, all that professionalism, of course, we have to be professional, but being ourselves and looking for ways to connect to our kids goes back to the core of why we became teachers, to make a bigger difference, to connect with our kids, to be ourselves. And I think that that richness and that rawness of us is what our kids love. And I think I wrote this on Facebook the other day, that a lot of our kids come to school for us. So if you can be yourself without going into your personal life, I see that happen a lot. Being yourself, connecting with the kids, looking for ways to make them feel like a valued, member of your class, building a really positive classroom environment. That was one of my secrets, I think. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm a very, very open person. And I think creating those really positive environments in my class was kind of one of my recipes to success, because I had some kids who really struggled, but they opened up in my class. I had some kids who really struggled, but they were really good writers. I had some kids in my class who struggled with HSC, but they were the ones who got, the band 5s and 6s. So connections with your kids are going to make such a difference when you're teaching them content, but when you're teaching them skills and you're working with them and you want to give them feedback and you want to work on really specific things. Everything that you do is intentional. Okay, number 4 is obviously developing that team approach within the class. I always said to my kids, like, I'm the coach. I'm the coach guiding you, showing you, demonstrating, modeling it to you. We're going to do a sample answer on the board. I'm going to break it down for you. You have to do that stuff. The kids don't know. They're being guided by you, so you need to break it down for them. And I used to say, like, you guys are the team. I'm the coach, you're the team. We actually need to come together to do well. If you want to do well in the HSC, you have to work with everyone else in the class. You can't just be out on your own. You can't be the superstar Michael Jordan of your CAFS class, because all of our results are affected by each other. You are a cohort. You need to work as a team for you to get the results in the end. And of course, and this goes without saying, but working with your colleagues and not against them. There are numerous occasions in my career, and I'm sure in yours, that I felt like I've been on a massive island, on a little CAFS island or a PE island, and I was by myself. No one was communicating with me because we were all on a different page. We were, I think, when I was young, like when I was in my early 20s, probably and maybe even in my 40s, to be honest, before I just left the classroom, I wanted to prove everyone, not wrong, but I wanted to prove myself. And I think a lot of PE teachers, because of who we are, we're competitive. Maybe not our home economic colleagues, our TAS colleagues might not be like this, but I don't know if that's that competitiveness of PE that brings that through. Like, we're going to kind of be against each other and not share and not collaborate, and we're going to try to create, some barriers. You guys are a team as well. You need to work together with your colleagues. And I know there's lots of teachers out there across New South Wales who feel like they are on a bit of an island. Many of them are in our CAFS collective membership, in our CAFS membership. many of them like to come to the CAFS conference because they feel like, they're at Broken Hill, or they're at Dubbo, or they're at Ballina, or they're down in Albury, or they're in Blacktown, or on the Central Coast. And they feel like even though they're maybe around a couple of people who like the course, they might be the only one teaching it, or they might not feel like they can actually connect. I love HSC marking. It was my favorite time of the year because I was in the room of like 100 CAFS teachers who loved our subject just like I did. And CAFS, I think CAFS is life, has been something that will be a phrase that we'll say forever, as long as it's called Community and Family Studies. But it is about life, but it's also become so part of our life. And that's why I personally love it so much. But it's really important that we're collaborating with each other. We're not against each other. We need to work together. Okay, and the last one with our LIFE acronym is Enhanced Assessment. I kind of touched on it before, but always thinking of what's ahead, beginning with the end in mind. So I always say from year 11, I'm going to have 3 assessment tasks. First one is going to be on resource management, 100%, no matter what. The second one, I'm not going to assess individuals and groups because a lot of the stuff is like 7 to 10 PE. It doesn't have any connections across the course. I'm going to ditch that, and I'm going to have an assessment on families and communities, potentially helping the kids with Part C and the option for the HSE. Again, if you're in our CAFS collective membership, you'll know exactly what I mean by that. But making sure we set the kids up for success, we begin with the end in mind for the option Part C, embedding wellbeing, having an assessment task like that. And then thirdly, having an end of course exam, prelim exam, year 11 exam, whatever you like to call it, having that practice assessment. You have to have an exam in year 11. If you wait to the trials, the kids are going to have no hope. They have to have that exam. Obviously, year 12, IRP has to be assessed in some way, shape or form. Groups in context I want to assess as well. And I want to assess my option explicitly. I don't want to just, give them a research task on our option. I want to set them up for that exam, that Part A, that Part B, and that Part C. I'm not going to assess I'm not going to assess parenting and caring because it's a lot easier content. There's not as much in there. There's a lot less learn to. I'm going to hold off for the trial. I'm going to put some stuff in the trial for that. And of course, I'm going to assess the trial. You have to begin with that end in mind, though. You have to think about that HSE and setting the kids up for success, all those little stepping stones along the way for the HSE. Obviously, your scope and sequence can go hand in hand with that. So when I do mine for year 12, especially, I'm going to bring the option forward. I'm going to do my option second. I'm going to start with research. I'm going to do option next. What that enables me to do is assess the kids on the option. And at the CAFS conference, we're going to focus a lot on how you can set the kids up from the beginning to help them with the option at the end. Because hands down, the option is the hardest part of the exam. The kids still struggle, especially Part C. You're going to have strategy within your assessment. You're going to think about big picture. You're going to be very intentional about what you do with your assessment and think about the skills, think about the glossary. What I also see is a lot of people who have very basic glossary of keywords in there. Explain, describe, outline. What happened to assess? What happened to what extent? What happened to analyze or discuss? You need to have those glossary of keywords in all of our assessments. Don't, step the kids along and wait to the HSC or the trial to do that. Start from year 7. Get the kids to assess, get the kids to analyze. As I mentioned, assessing big picture content across the course, focusing on things like leadership, power, communication, preparations for parenting. They're all easier concepts. They're also not thinking about the big picture. Yes, the preparations are, but they're quite easy in terms of this kind of links to the next one, maximizing knowledge, understanding, and skills. But we're thinking about what we can do to really, be very intentional along the whole way. So thinking about, okay, year 11, resource management, I might do an assessment task that hits maybe needs, support, well-being, maybe a research method, like whatever, I think it's questionnaires in that one. So really kind of thinking about, okay, how do I then link it to groups in context? How do I then link some of my examples to parenting and caring, and so on? And then obviously maximizing knowledge. So we've spoken about that content, the understanding of that knowledge. So not just regurgitating content, which I see a lot happen. I can see kids, they've learnt a definition, they write it down in the exam or an assessment task without actually understanding what it looks like. Their examples are lacking. They can't connect it. They can't connect something like policies and legislations together. They actually don't know the difference. They don't know how they're interrelated, or they might not show that connection between reliability and validity, or the roles of parents and carers. They don't show that understanding of it. They say, roles are PBS, promoting well-being, building positive relationships, satisfying specific needs. Full stop. They don't show that understanding. And what I also would love to see people work more on are those skills, modeling it, demonstrating it, explicitly teaching it, breaking it down. I know explicit teaching is a current focus in the department, but really thinking about that big picture and being very intentional. Back to my word for the year, intentional with what you do, and making sure you're being very explicit with your skills. And that's not just content skills like connections and stuff, but that's the glossary of keywords, starting that from year 7, peel paragraph structure, well-being structure for part C. So it's all very, very, very intentional with what you're doing. So after not having any idea about what I was going to speak about, hopefully that gave you something that made sense. But let's quickly unpack my CAFS is Life acronym. And so we're going to have links to families and communities and case studies, scenarios, etc. We're going to show that interrelationship between the content. We're going to foster positive relationships with our kids and our colleagues. And we're going to really think about enhancing our assessment across and from year 11 to year 12. So look, that is a very small snapshot about what you can do to just make some tiny tweaks with what you're doing. Of course, I've been teaching CAFS. I've been sharing my CAFS love for over 20 years. I started teaching in 2004, and I feel very blessed to be able to fall into this course, because when I first started, I had the syllabus, I had the purple textbook, taking it to bed, and that's about it. I had no one. My coordinator was amazing. PDHP was her focus. She didn't know CAFS, and it was only really new back then. That was only the second year through. So no one really knew it. No one really knew what they were doing. I had a TAS teacher teaching CAFS at some point. We had one of our beautiful older teachers who was, an ex-PE who moved into HESI, still teaching CAFS, but she didn't love it. She was kind of just giving it. So, this has all evolved over 20 years. And obviously everything I share with you is very intentional. So at the CAFS conference in 3 weeks' time, it will be very intentional. That might be our focus for the conference. I haven't had a focus, but this might be what we could use. Very intentional, maximizing every single lesson, every single opportunity. And it's not going to be perfect. Things aren't always going to go how you think it's going to go. But if you can be very intentional with what you do to go, I've got 45 minutes. What am I going to do to set my kids up for success? What connections for success am I going to have? Because time goes very quick in those 2 years that we have our kids. It absolutely flies. And I think I've only realized how much is in my brain, how much we hold in our minds that we take for granted, because there's so much up here that we're teaching the kids, year 7 to 10 PE or TAS or PAS or child studies or food tech, CAFS, HMS now, PDH, and all the other pedagogy that goes behind it. There's lots in our brain that I think we take for granted. So if you would love some new strategies, some fresh ideas, some fresh approaches, we would love to have you at the CAFS conference. October 18 and 19. It's going to be set on the most beautiful location in New South Wales that we decided to move to from Western Sydney to the Central Coast at Kilcare. Last year, where it's literally like overlooking the beach, the surf club. And last year we saw dolphins kind of jumping through the waves and playing. Beautiful food. Our chef, I spoke to him yesterday. He goes to our gym. He has some delicious food on the menu for us. And look, if you just want a place, some connection, we cannot wait to have you. If you have been thinking about it and don't want to miss out and want to join us this year, the lownet.com/conference is where you need to go to register. But Rego closes this Friday. So end of week 10, Rego closes so we can get stuff sorted in the holidays. But I hope today's episode was practical. Hopefully it was intentional. Let me know what resonated with you. I've been having some really great conversations with people on Instagram. So kellybell.coach is where you need to go. Or you can message me on Facebook if you're a Facebook user. But also, if you're wanting to share your biggest takeaway from today, pop in our emails and I'd love to hear from you. Have the most amazing rest of the week. Enjoy graduation when it gets here. And on Friday, it's time to put your laptop away because you get to have a beautiful, deserving break. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great week.